welcome to Talking to AI about AI. I've taken to talking to AI in the car, dialing back the playlists and podcasts. We work through ideas on business, my art, and realistic and sometimes far-reaching AI use cases. Today we're talking about art, my art, having a go with computer vision and seeing how my AI friend can unpack the work and lead a conversation about it. If you're wondering, this is my actual conversation with a chatbot where we verbally talk back and forth. What you're listening to is a slimmed down transcript just to cut down on the time. But it is the actual discussion, then fed through text-to-voice AI to generate what you're hearing. This is my clone voice and a completely made-up collaborator voice.
And that collaborator is me. Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here. I'll warn you, this is a long one. I wanted to give you a taste of what it's like to collaborate with AI on inspiration, talking through ideas on how to evolve your art. And, well, think of it like bouncing ideas off a buddy. Let's jump right in. Here's a recent piece of mine. I wanted to talk about how I can use this style in a more complex environment. Maybe start with a brief commentary of the piece for those who cannot see what I just uploaded.
Absolutely. The artwork uploaded presents a striking visual composition, utilising a pop art aesthetic reminiscent of the work of artists like Roy Lichtenstein. The dominant use of halftone dots, bold colours, and overlaying text elements is characteristic of the pop art movement, which often draws from popular culture and commercial art techniques. The central figure, a woman seemingly deep in thought or contemplation, is set against a backdrop of vivid, contrasting colours and textual elements, creating a dynamic and layered visual effect. Splashes of paint, particularly noticeable in blue, add a sense of spontaneity and rawness to the piece, suggesting an intervention of street art sensibilities. To discuss using this style in a more complex environment, could you clarify whether you're interested in the technical aspects of creating such artwork or the conceptual approach to integrating pop art into different environments?
I mean in the conceptual sense. For example, using a couple or group of people or more things in the background, something with less of an individual, very pronounced subject.
Absolutely, in a conceptual sense, adapting this style to a more complex environment with multiple subjects or a denser background could offer a rich tapestry of narratives and interactions. Incorporating a group of individuals rather than a single subject could allow for the exploration of relationships and dynamics within the artwork. If you were to use this style with several people, consider how their interactions might inform the composition. Would they be connected by a common theme or emotion? The background could be a collage of various scenes or elements that relate to each subject, creating a narrative or commentary. As for the technique, maintaining clarity and focus might be a challenge with more elements. We might need to strategically use colour and the size of the halftone dots to create focal points and manage the viewer's attention. What sort of setting or theme are you considering for this complex environment?
I tend to place a setting in a cafe or pub or some kind of social gathering. It does get challenging to manage what one should be looking at when the compositions are so complex. I'm trying to figure out how I could set some focal point that you can see from across the room, something that stands out as central, but then also has the complexity to allow somebody to come up close and dig into the details. What are your thoughts?
Creating a piece with a setting like a cafe or pub, especially within this pop art style, can indeed be both challenging and intriguing. The key to crafting a successful composition in such busy scenes lies in the balance between the overall impact and intricate details. For a focal point that stands out, you might want to consider an element that is thematically or visually striking, a character with a distinct outfit or posture, or perhaps an object that is larger and more colourful than its surroundings. This will draw the eye from a distance. When it comes to the finer details, these can be elements that tell the individual stories of the patrons or the history of the place. They could be found in the textures of the walls, the expressions on the faces, or even in small, intricate background activities. Technically, to manage the viewer's gaze, play with the scale of the halftone dots and the brightness of colours, larger dots and brighter colours for the main focal point, with smaller dots and more muted tones for the periphery. Could you tell me more about the kinds of characters or elements you're thinking of including?
Here's another recent piece, but one with multiple people around a table, having some sort of conversation, discussion, or interacting in some way. For those that can't see this, can you describe what I just uploaded?
Of course. The image presented is a visually striking digital artwork that utilises a monochromatic palette, primarily in grayscale. The central focus is a lively social scene, possibly within a pub or a cafe, capturing a moment of intense discussion or interaction. The figures are rendered with a half-tone styled engraving pattern or texture. giving the piece a texture akin to vintage newspaper print or classical engraving, which adds a layer of depth and nostalgia to the scene. A prominent feature in the artwork is the bold text in the upper right corner that possibly reads even the reaction, though the words are partially obscured. This may suggest a narrative or thematic element, possibly inviting the viewer to ponder the reactions or interactions depicted within the group. The contrast between the clarity of the figures in the foreground and the more obscured, less defined figures in the background creates a sense of depth, focusing the viewer's attention on the central group. The use of light and shadow further accentuates the figures and their expressions, enhancing the dramatic effect of the composition.
Particular piece. I think I was looking for the group of people itself as the defining focal point. Having something of a triad that mimicked the central figure in that earlier piece of the woman sitting at the table. Okay? What do you think some of the positive aspects of this are, as well as some of the things that could be improved?
For a composition that centers around a group of people interacting at a table, drawing inspiration from the style of the artwork you've shared, there are several positive aspects to consider. Let's start with the positives. The dynamic between the characters can be rich ground for storytelling. Their gestures, expressions, and the way they occupy space around the table can convey a lot about their relationships and the conversation's nature. Utilising the pop art style, with its bold outlines and colours, can help each character stand out while also tying them together into a cohesive group. The triad formation around the table can be a strong compositional element, guiding the viewer's eye naturally around the piece, as far as areas that could be improved, ensuring each character is distinct and contributes uniquely to the overall narrative. Balancing the vividness of the background with the subjects to avoid overwhelming the scene or obscuring the interaction, creating a sense of depth and space at the table, which can be challenging in the often flat aesthetic of pop art. In terms of the conversation and interaction, think about how body language and facial expressions can be exaggerated to fit the pop art style while still conveying the intended emotions and dynamics.
I can appreciate those areas of improvement, but in this particular piece, I think the idea was that the ambiguity of the foreground and background people, at least in terms of distinctly identifying them, giving concrete definitions to them, was to portray a sense of voyeurism. Like, these are not people that, they're fuzzy, like what's happening is unclear, right? You don't really know what's happening.
It's a fascinating approach, using ambiguity to invite voyeurism and a sense of mystery. For interactions that could work within this context, consider the following scenarios. A secretive exchange of glances or subtle gestures between two individuals, hinting at an unspoken understanding or shared secret. One person in the group gesturing animatedly, perhaps telling a story, with others reacting in various ways. Some leaning in, engaged, others distracted or disinterested. A character looking out towards the viewer, breaking the fourth wall, which can create a direct connection with the audience and heighten the sense of being an unseen observer. Include objects that might imply interaction, like a game being played at the table, a shared meal with a moment of passing dishes or clinking glasses. Each of these scenarios can create a narrative thread that the viewer can follow, adding depth to the voyeuristic experience you're aiming for. The key is in the subtlety of these interactions and the possibility they offer for multiple interpretations. Would you be inclined to explore any particular emotional tone or social dynamic among the characters?
You said something interesting there. It's easy to see how a glance or gesture can invoke some sense that something is going on, that there's some connection between some individuals, maybe hinting at some kind of interaction. But it's just the human-to-human connections there. But I like the idea of the examples you gave of passing a plate, clinking of a glass, playing a game. There's something tangible happening. Not just the glances, but it's the interplay of something physical and perhaps not quite clinking or not quite finishing some physical action. And then there are elements of glances, gestures, body language may or may not be aligned with the physical actions, perhaps, even in conflict.
The interplay between physical actions and body language that may seem contradictory creates a compelling dynamic. Let's expand on that. Picture a character passing a plate with a smile, but their body is turned slightly away, suggesting reluctance or distraction. Imagine a person laughing at a joke, but their eyes are scanning the room, indicating they're not fully present or engaged. Think of someone raising a glass for a toast, yet their posture is stiff, hinting at tension or discomfort with the celebration. Visualize a character reaching out to touch another's hand in a comforting gesture, but their expression is one of worry or doubt. These contrasts between action and expression can suggest layers of complexity in relationships and individual experiences. They invite the viewer to question the story behind each interaction. Is the laughter genuine? Why is a toasting person uncomfortable? What's the cause of the worry behind the comforting hand? Would you want these interactions to be subtle, requiring close observation, or more overt to catch the viewer's eye immediately?
I'm starting to see a framework emerging here. I like the idea of this approach of maybe 3 levels of context. The lowest level, the most concrete level, something physical is happening. You understand what's happening. It's unambiguous. You know what's about to happen or what just happened physically. But then there's the gestures and the body language. Somebody turning away, leaning in, leaning out, that suggests there's something else going on. And then there's even more subtle, like the facial expressions and minute muscle movements that maybe are fleeting but are captured, that resonate, those little tiny little micro moments that we pick up on to understand what's really happening. Or sometimes we miss them. Talk to me a little bit more about what happens around this framework that might help direct attention, meaning or emotion in a piece.
Colour is a powerful tool for setting the tone and directing attention. Warm colours can draw the eye and create a sense of intimacy or tension, while cool colours can provide contrast or suggest detachment. Colour can also be symbolic. Reds for passion or conflict, blues for calmness or isolation. Texture can add depth and convey mood. Rough textures might imply decay or unease, while smooth textures can suggest order or calm. In the background, textures can reflect the atmosphere of the setting, a gritty texture for a worn-down pub or sleek surfaces for a modern cafe. Light and shadow play a crucial role in directing focus and adding drama. High contrast between light and shadow can create a focal point or highlight a particular action or expression. Shadows can also be used metaphorically to hint at hidden tensions or underlying stories. Compositionally, the arrangement of elements can lead the viewer's gaze through the artwork. Using leading lines, a bar's edge, a table shape, or even the direction in which multiple characters are looking can guide the viewer from one part of the piece to another, creating a visual journey. Lastly, the inclusion of symbolic objects or incongruent elements can add layers of meaning. A clock with no hands, a picture within a picture, or a misplaced item can all suggest a deeper narrative or serve as a metaphor for the themes you're exploring.
I like these more abstract examples of adding complexity and meaning into a piece. Subtlety, that's something that's typically really important in my work. There's a couple of perspectives. I think, for one, juxtaposition is an important factor. In my work, the blend of technology is important. It's a right-left brain kind of juxtaposition, starting with the core idea of art on the surface, but technology underneath. And the second concept to take into consideration is the consistent backdrop of printmaking in my work. My work is completely digital, but there's an element or an inspiration from the history of printmaking that I try to bring into my work. You can see it in the engraving texture in these pieces that you're referring to as dots, but they're really engraving patterns. I often try to bring in some printmaking references. There's the WJ stamp, which are my initials backwards. So the print is typically mirrored from the original, at least in the old days, and with some techniques. But there's also a play on that it's not quite mirrored. Their order is reversed, but not mirrored. But I like to play on this idea of things that are backwards, but not quite right. A lot of times I have graffiti overlaid on my work, and often the drips go up, not down. So those two elements, juxtaposition and things that are backwards or opposite, are two things that I think work with this abstract approach you're talking. Let's talk about that further.
The concepts of juxtaposition and elements that defy expectations, like reversed elements or upward drips, add a unique layer of intrigue to your work. These elements challenge the viewer's perceptions and invite them to delve deeper into the artwork. Here's how you can further play with these ideas. A juxtaposition of old and new. You mentioned the blend of technology and printmaking. This could be visually represented by contrasting elements from different eras or styles. For instance, a digital pixelation effect, juxtaposed with traditional engraving patterns, creates a bridge between the old and the new, highlighting the evolution of art forms. Reverse elements. Using elements that are backwards or reversed, such as your WJ stamp, plays with the viewer's expectations. You could expand on this by incorporating mirrored text and graffiti, or by creating scenes where actions typically going in one direction, like walking or looking, are reversed. This could symbolize the idea of looking back or rethinking norms. Defying gravity. The idea of drips going upwards is visually striking and can symbolize rebellion against norms or natural laws. You could apply this concept to other elements like smoke drifting downwards or people sitting in ways that defy gravity. This could create a surreal, dreamlike quality in your work. Colour and light. Use these to emphasize the juxtaposition. For example, a scene in monochrome with a single vividly coloured object can create a focal point that draws attention to the intended juxtaposition. Layering and transparency. Playing with layers where the top layer contradicts or complements the bottom, one can create a sense of depth and complexity. This can be done with digital elements overlaying traditional ones or vice versa. In implementing these ideas, consider how they contribute to the narrative or theme you want to convey. Each element should add to the story or the emotion you're trying to evoke. What themes or stories are you looking to explore through these juxtapositions and reversed elements? Understanding this might help in suggesting more specific implementations.
Let's take this step further, not just in terms of doing things that are juxtaposed or backwards, but done so subtly. Maybe it's not backwards, it's just simply reversed. Or that they at first seem opposite, but they're really the same thing. It's that subtle tweak. That's what I'm really going for. As an example of the W and the J that I mentioned. The letters are reversed. Of course, when the W is printed backwards, it's still a W, but the J shouldn't be, but in my implementation is not mirrored. So it's kind of reversed, but it's not. It's not mirrored completely, only conceptually. What are examples of doing that? Making something seem like they are opposite or mirrored. But wait, no, maybe it isn't.
Your approach to subtlety, where elements appear reversed or juxtaposed but upon closer inspection reveal deeper layers, is a sophisticated artistic strategy. Here are some ways you can implement this subtle tweaking. Partial reversals. Similar to your WJ example, use elements that are partially reversed or altered. For instance, an image where half is a direct reflection of the other, but with small, almost imperceptible differences that reveal themselves upon closer inspection. Ambiguous symbolism. Employ symbols that have dual meanings. A symbol that appears one way but can also be interpreted as its opposite. For instance, a digital clock that reads a time that is the same when turned upside down, like 12:15 and 5:21, suggesting both the passage and reversal of time. Visual puns. Create visual puns where an element looks like one thing from a distance but reveals itself to be something else up close. This could be a play on textures, shapes, or shadows. Conceptual mirroring. Use themes or narratives that mirror each other but have subtle differences. Two characters in a scene could be engaging in similar activities, but with slight variations in expression or posture that suggest different emotions or intentions. Inconspicuous anomalies. Introduce small anomalies in common scenes. A book with text running in the wrong direction, a reflection in a mirror that doesn't match the object, or shadows that fall in an unexpected direction. These techniques can create captivating tension in your work, where the viewer is drawn into a deeper examination and reflection on the piece. It's this kind of layered storytelling and visual play that can make art deeply engaging and thought-provoking.
That 12:15 example is outstanding.
I'm glad you liked the 12:15 clock example. It's a subtle yet effective way to play with perception and time, fitting well with your theme of subtle reversals and juxtapositions. Using this kind of understated yet clever visual twist not only intrigues viewers but also invites them to ponder the deeper meaning behind the artwork. It's these small details that can transform a piece from simply being viewed to being deeply experienced and remembered.
You have my mind reeling. Many of the examples you gave are really great. The thing about the 12:15 example that I liked and was really struck by was that you would never really know it unless you really thought about it. If you had something like a mirror in a scene and something was seemingly reversed or mirrored in it, but then you see there are subtle differences, a brooch on the wrong side, earrings that are a little different. Those are clever. Those are interesting. It draws somebody in, but you can figure it out. With the 12:15 example, it's almost like it's got to be pointed out to you. Like somebody has to tell you, or you have to be super clever to find that one. Even better if it was on an analog clock, almost like little Easter eggs to be found. Elements that are not quite what you'd think, but draw people in and they start forming theories about why is this element like this, or why is it in a position like that. It's just fun. I'd love to collect more of those. List tiny little trinkets that I could pepper into my work.
Creating these subtle, almost hidden elements in your artwork, akin to visual Easter eggs, can be a delightful way to engage and challenge your audience. They add layers of intrigue and depth, encouraging viewers to look closer and think deeper. Here's some ideas for such elements. Anachronisms. Introduce items that don't belong to the era or setting of the piece. For example, a vintage scene with a modern gadget hidden in plain sight. Shadow play. Use shadows to subtly hint at something that isn't directly visible in the scene. A shadow could suggest an object or figure that's not in the frame, sparking curiosity. Reflected worlds. In mirrored surfaces, subtly alter the reflection to show a different scene or mood, hinting at an alternate reality or inner thoughts of a character. Cryptic text. Include text in a foreign language or coded message that, when translated or deciphered, adds a new layer of meaning to the piece. Inverted elements, small elements that are upside down or inverted, which may go unnoticed at first but add a twist once spotted. Puzzle pieces, the parts of the artwork that align or connect in unexpected ways, creating a larger image or message when viewed from a specific angle or distance. Art within art, tiny, almost imperceptible artworks within the larger piece, like a painting on a wall in the background that holds its own story or clue. Nature's secrets, incorporating natural elements that form shapes or patterns that resemble something else, like clouds that subtly form a face or tree branches that mimic a figure. These subtle details not only make the artwork more engaging, but also encourage viewers to return to it, discovering new aspects each time. Think of each piece as a visual riddle, offering different interpretations and experiences to each observer.
You remind me of a couple really interesting examples. First, I was struck by your comment about the off-screen shadow that might indicate something beyond the frame. Reminds me of a picture I took of myself and my daughter years ago. She was super little, maybe 3 or 4. Actually, it wasn't really the two of us at all. No people, no part of it was us, just the shadows. Long shadows of an adult holding hands with a little girl on a walk that was super meaningful to me, and a pretty charming snapshot. I still remember it today. The other thing I was reminded of was the movie Angel Heart with Mickey Rourke, Lisa Bonet, and Robert De Niro. It's an interesting movie, a bit weird and dark, whatever. The background of a lot of the scenes. Fan blades occasionally switch directions, implying something super subtle until you notice it. Then pretty obvious, people have all these theories on why, not sure if it was ever really explained, but it's a sweet, subtle element. I'd love to have more of those examples, hidden things until they show themselves, and you can't help but think there must be meaning there.
The movie example beautifully illustrates the power of subtle, thought-provoking elements in visual storytelling. These kinds of details can deeply enrich the viewer's experience. Here are more ideas for such nuanced elements in your artwork. Incongruous reflections, mirrors or reflective surfaces that subtly show a different scene. Perhaps a memory or an alternate reality that only becomes evident upon close inspection. Hidden silhouettes, shapes or figures hidden within other elements, like faces subtly formed in tree leaves or building windows, revealed only to those who look closely. Reverse textures, textures that subtly change direction or nature, like water flowing upwards or flames that seem to cool rather than heat. Symbolic weather elements, clouds, sunbeams, or stars that subtly form symbols or patterns, possibly representing the internal state of a character or the mood of the scene. Invisible threads, almost imperceptible lines or threads that connect characters or objects, symbolizing unseen connections or relationships. Asymmetrical symmetry, designs that appear symmetrical at first glance, but upon closer inspection, have slight variations that suggest a deeper story or imbalance. Altered time, clocks or timepieces that show impossible times or dates, hinting at time travel, alternate realities, or the fluidity of time. Microscopic messages, small, almost unreadable text or images hidden in plain sight, like a tiny letter in a character's pocket or a miniature scene in a window. Or perspective tricks, elements that change meaning or appearance based on the viewer's perspective, like an object that looks different from various angles. Fading elements, parts of the scene that gradually fade or change colour, only noticeable after prolonged observation, suggesting change or decay. These elements can act as visual puzzles, making the viewer part of the creative process as they discover and interpret these hidden details. It turns the artwork into an interactive experience, deepening the connection between the art and its audience.
You know, I have a degree in sculpture from way back, and I'm really enamored by physical work, even though I work completely digitally. And my digital work is, at least historically, two-dimensional. I'm wondering, you mentioned looking at a piece from different angles and getting different meanings. How might you do that with a two-dimensional piece?
Translating the concept of viewing a piece from different angles to a two-dimensional digital format is a fascinating challenge. It's about creating an illusion of dimensionality and perspective shift within a flat medium. Here are some ways to achieve this anamorphic art. Create an image that appears distorted, unless viewed from a specific angle or through a particular device, like a cylindrical mirror or lens. This technique can be adapted digitally to simulate the effect. Parallax effects. Use layers in your digital artwork that move independently as the viewer scrolls or shifts their viewpoint, creating a sense of depth and movement. Optical illusions. Incorporate elements that look different when viewed from far away versus up close, or that change appearance based on the viewer's focus, like hidden images within a larger picture. Interactive elements. Create digital art that changes when interacted with, such as elements that shift or reveal hidden details when clicked or hovered over. Stereoscopic images. Design pairs of images that When viewed together, create a three-dimensional effect, similar to the old ViewMaster reels. Changeable lighting and shadow. Craft scenes where light and shadow play a significant role and alter them to change the mood or reveal new details, simulating a change in time of day or lighting conditions. Augmented reality. If you're open to mixing digital art with technology, augmented reality or AR can bring two-dimensional artworks to life when viewed through a device, revealing hidden layers, animations, or stories. Or perspective shifts. Create scenes with multiple potential focal points, where the perceived subject changes depending on which element the viewer focuses on. These methods can bring a dynamic and interactive quality to your digital work. Merging your background in sculpture with your current digital medium. Each technique offers a unique way to engage viewers, inviting them to explore your artwork from multiple angles.
Tell me more about the perspective shift suggestion. That sounds kind of interesting. How would that work?
The concept of perspective shifts in two-dimensional art involves creating a composition that offers multiple interpretations or focal points, depending on how the viewer perceives it. This technique plays with visual perception and can be quite engaging. Here are a few ways it can work. Dual images. Design an image that contains two or more distinct images within the same frame, depending on how you look at it. A classic example is the vase or two faces illusion. The viewer can see either a vase or two faces in profile, but often not both simultaneously. Ambiguous scenes. Create scenes where the context changes based on the viewer's focus. For example, a scene that looks like a peaceful garden at first glance, but reveals hidden characters or elements that suggest a different narrative when observed closely. Overlapping narratives. Layer elements in a way that they can be interpreted as part of different stories. For instance, a figure that seems to be part of a background crowd in one interpretation could become the main subject in another, changing the story of the artwork. Shifts in scale and proportion. Use scale and proportion creatively to challenge perception. An object that appears small and distant in one view might become large and dominant when the viewer focuses on it, altering the perceived spatial dynamics. Colour and light tricks. Utilise colour and lighting to shift focus. Certain areas can be highlighted or dimmed to guide the viewer's eye, changing the scene's narrative or mood as they focus on different elements. Story layers. Embed multiple layers of stories within a single image. A character's expression, a seemingly inconsequential background detail, or a symbolic object can each tell a different story, which becomes apparent as the viewer shifts their focus. These techniques not only make the artwork visually intriguing, but also intellectually stimulating, as they invite viewers to explore and reinterpret the scene actively. It turns the viewing experience into a discovery process where each observation can reveal something new.
Okay. I will say, I had a different idea in my mind when you first suggested this that seems a little bit different than the examples you just gave, though your examples are great. To me, I immediately envisioned that, depending on who you are looking at, that the perspective behind or around each individual is set on a point in space that's different. So you're looking at one person and you see one perspective or environment behind or around that person. And then if you look at another person, and it has a different perspective or environment. But yet still, holistically, the two backgrounds or environments somehow work together. That was one thought. The other thought was that perhaps the structure of each individual in a composition mirrors others. So for example, a person has something notable over their head and to the right and left of them. And everyone has that same structure in it somehow. They all have something above and to the side of them, subtle perhaps. But when you see it, it stands out as deliberate. But I like the direction of this playing more to this idea that there is something you see initially, and then there's more when you unpack or dig into the layers or look closer. Kind of getting back to the idea of it at first looks like normal art, and it's not until you get to know the piece that you understand that it's a digital creation. There's code behind it. There's something that you didn't see at first that is entirely different from what you initially thought.
Your interpretation of perspective shifts, where different elements in a composition offer varying perspectives and narratives, aligns well with your digital art approach. It's a nuanced method that allows for multiple layers of meaning and interpretation. Here are some artists and techniques that align with this concept. MC Escher was known for his mathematically inspired art. Escher played with perspective, space, and tessellation. His work often features impossible constructions and explorations of infinity, where the perspective shifts dramatically as you follow different elements of his drawings. Giuseppe Arcimboldo, a Renaissance painter known for creating portrait heads made entirely of objects like fruits, vegetables, flowers, and books. At first glance, his paintings look like still life, but a closer inspection reveals the cleverly disguised portraits. Salvador Dali often used double images, where one part of the painting would be a close-up of one object, but at a distance, it forms a completely different image. Julian Beaver, a contemporary artist known for his pavement drawings, and anamorphic illusions, creates work viewed from one specific angle. These drawings appear three-dimensional and real, but from other viewpoints, they look distorted. Bridget Riley, known for her op art, creates images that give the impression of movement, hidden images, or warping, depending on the viewer's position and perspective. For your work, consider integrating these concepts of shifting perspectives and hidden layers. This approach invites viewers to engage with your art on a deeper level, discovering new aspects each time they look.
Now, it's funny you mentioned the street artist uses perspective when viewed from a specific position. It reminds me of something I did when I was in college. I had a single in the dorm, and at some point I started painting directly on the walls for the ceiling. I drew statues with a distorted, extreme perspective, like you mentioned, as if there were no ceiling, just sky and statues jetting upward, laying in my bed, or from my pillow specifically, looking up. Everything looked like a three-dimensional space, and everywhere else it was mucky muck. Cost a lot of money to repaint that room. Anyway, yeah, let's explore this a little bit more. Let's start with the easiest one, where every individual has their own setting behind it, their own perspective perhaps, or something that is based on a theoretical position from where you're looking. Maybe there's a hallway behind each person, radiating in all directions, or something on the wall behind them, or something. So let's start with that. What are some thoughts about how to approach that kind of concept?
Your college dorm room painting sounds like an incredible immersive experience, using perspective and optical illusion to transform a space. Translating this concept into a two-dimensional digital artwork where each individual has their own unique setting or perspective behind them is a fascinating challenge. Here's how you might approach it. Unique perspective points. For each character in your composition, determine a unique vanishing point for the perspective lines behind them. This creates a sense of each character existing in their own distinct space, even within the same frame. For example, if the character is facing left, the perspective lines behind them might recede to the right, creating a sense of depth and direction. Radiating backgrounds. Similar to your idea of hallway, you could design the background so that it radiates outward from each character. This could be achieved through architectural elements like doorways, windows, or hallways that seem to extend from each person, creating individualized spaces within the collective scene. Symbolic environments. Tailor the background setting of each character to reflect their personality or story. For instance, one character might have a backdrop of a bustling cityscape, while another has a serene nature scene. This not only differentiates their spaces, but also adds layers of meaning to each character. Colour and light. Use colour and lighting to reinforce the individual spaces. Different colour palettes or lighting conditions for each character's backdrop can further distinguish their unique environments. Interaction between spaces. While each character has their own perspective and setting, find subtle ways to connect these spaces. Maybe the lines of one character's perspective subtly blend into another's, or shadows cast from one space affect another, creating a sense of interconnectedness despite the distinct perspectives. Layering and depth. Experiment with layering elements at different depths. Foreground and background elements could interact in ways that play with the viewer's perception of space, like an object from one character's space appearing to overlap into another's. Interactive elements. If you're open to incorporating interactive digital elements, you could create parts of the artwork that change or reveal more details as the viewer interacts with them, perhaps mimicking the effect of shifting perspective in a physical space. This approach not only creates a visually dynamic piece, but also invites viewers to explore each character's story and space, engaging with the artwork on multiple levels.
That's enough on that concept. Remind me of some of the other concepts that you mentioned.
Certainly. Let's revisit some of the other concepts for incorporating perspective shift and subtle narrative layers in two-dimensional digital art. Dual images. Create an artwork that contains two distinct images or scenes within the same frame, depending on the viewer's perspective. This could be something like an optical illusion, where the image changes based on how you focus on it. Ambiguous scenes. Design scenes where the context or story changes based on the viewer's focus. At first glance, it might look like one scene, but a closer look reveals hidden characters or elements that suggest a different narrative. Overlapping narratives. Layer elements in a way that they can be interpreted as part of different stories. A figure that appears to be part of a background crowd in one interpretation could become the main subject in another, altering the narrative. Interactive elements. In digital art, create elements that change when clicked or hovered over, shifting the perspective of the scene. This can also be achieved through subtle animations that elements move or transform over time. Colour and light tricks. Use colour and lighting to subtly shift focus and narrative. Brightly lit areas or vivid colours can draw the eye and suggest one interpretation, while more muted tones can reveal a different story. Symbolic weather elements incorporate natural elements like clouds or stars that subtly form symbols or patterns, perhaps representing the internal state of a character or the mood of the scene. Inverted elements introduce small elements that are upside down or inverted, which might go unnoticed at first but add a twist once spotted. Microscopic messages include small, almost unreadable text or images hidden in plain sight, offering new layers of meaning when discovered. Or perspective tricks, elements that change meaning or appearance based on the viewer's perspective, like an object that looks different from various angles. Fading elements, parts of the scene that subtly change colour or fade, only noticeable after prolonged observation, suggesting change or transformation. Each of these concepts offers a unique way to engage viewers and create a multi-layered narrative within your digital artwork. They encourage a more interactive and exploratory experience, inviting viewers to delve deeper and discover new aspects each time they view your piece.
You mentioned earlier that Salvador Dali did work with dual images. Give me a couple examples of his work and how he approached this concept.
Salvador Dali often incorporated the concept of dual images or double meanings in his artwork. Here are a couple of notable examples. The Slave Market with the disappearing bust of Voltaire in 1940. This painting is a classic example of Dali's use of double images. At first glance, it depicts a scene at a slave market. However, on closer examination, the figures of the slaves and the surrounding architecture cleverly align to form the large, distinct bust of the philosopher Voltaire. The painting plays with perception, as the viewer's focus shifts between seeing the individual figures in the market and the overarching image of Voltaire's face. Swans reflecting elephants 1937. In this painting, Dali uses the reflections in water to create a double image. Above the waterline, you see a group of swans floating peacefully. Their reflections in the water, however, transform into elephants. This visual trickery is a hallmark of Dali's surrealist style, where one image seamlessly becomes another, creating a dreamlike and thought-provoking scene. Dali's approach to dual images often involved meticulous planning and a deep understanding of human perception. He played with the idea of optical illusion, forcing the viewer to question their understanding of reality. His work invites a deeper exploration, revealing its secrets only upon careful observation. These examples can serve as inspiration for incorporating dual imagery into your digital artwork, using careful composition and a playful approach to perception.
What are some examples of how one might approach this within digital work? I don't want to copy Salvador Dali, but this idea of overlapping images, the concept of one thing becoming another. I'm curious, what are modern ways of thinking about this concept?
Exploring the concept of overlapping images, or one thing morphing into another in a modern digital art context, opens up many creative possibilities. Here are some contemporary approaches. Digital collage and layering use digital tools to create a digital collage where elements from different images overlap and merge. This can create complex layered compositions where different elements combine to form new images. Morphing animations utilize digital animation techniques where one image transforms into another over time. This can be particularly effective in digital media, as the viewer can watch the transition unfold. Interactive art create digital art that changes based on viewer interaction. This could involve elements that morph or reveal new images when clicked, hovered over, or viewed from a mobile device. Augmented reality. AR can bring static images to life. For instance, a painting that, when viewed through an AR app, reveals a hidden layer of imagery or animation that interacts with the original piece. Algorithmic art. Use algorithms to generate art where elements dynamically overlap and change based on certain rules or data inputs, creating unpredictable and ever-evolving imagery. Projection mapping. Project digital images onto physical objects or spaces, where the projection interacts with the shape and form of the surface, creating a dynamic interplay between the digital and the physical. These approaches allow for a dynamic and multifaceted exploration of imagery, where the boundary between different elements or scenes blurs, creating a sense of fluidity and transformation.
Thank you for this. That was great. I'm truly grateful for your inspiration and insight. It's incredibly helpful to have someone to talk through ideas with, especially when it comes to navigating the nuanced and evolving landscape of digital art.
I'm truly glad to hear that you found our discussion valuable and inspiring. It's always a pleasure to delve into the multifaceted world of digital art with someone as passionate and innovative as you. The realm of digital creation is indeed vast and ever-changing. and it's exciting to explore and understand it together. If you ever wish to discuss more ideas, explore new concepts, or seek further insights into the art world, feel free to reach out. Well, collaborative discussions like ours are what drive creativity and innovation in this dynamic field. Keep pushing the boundaries of your art, and I'm here whenever you need a sounding board for your ideas.
Well, that concludes our fascinating exploration of overlapping images, perspective shifts, and the art of visual illusion in digital creation. It's been incredibly enlightening discussing these modern interpretations of classic concepts, delving into digital techniques and approaches. For those listening, I hope this dialogue has sparked your own creativity and given you new perspectives on the art of the digital era. It's a field that's always growing and changing, providing endless opportunities for innovation and exploration. Thanks for joining us on this artistic journey. If you've enjoyed our discussion and are keen to dive deeper into the world of digital art and its endless possibilities, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support really helps us keep these conversations going and brings more exciting content your way. Until we meet again, keep pushing the boundaries of your creativity, explore the unexplored, and above all, keep redefining the art of the digital age. Take care and keep creating.